You too. Take it away.
Awesome, thank you. Hi, everyone. My name's Elizabeth Toby. I'm going to start us off, share a little bit about the farm, and then I'm going to pass it to Brian to dive a little more into the soil health practices that we utilize here at Bundle Sticks Farm. So glad to be joining you all this morning. Thanks for having us. As Megan said, Bundle Sticks Farm is located in Southeast Indiana. We are in Harrison County in Lanesville. We got started in 2023, so we're just wrapping up our third growing season here, although we both have farming backgrounds before landing at this particular farm project. Our farm's 55 acres. We're in a beautiful rural area surrounded by other farmland. Of our farm, we have 10 acres in forest at the back of our farm. You can see in this upper corner here the overall overview map. So we're just due west of Louisville at this little smiley face. And then on the other side of the screen, this is our farm. So the back 10 acres is our woods. House is up here by the road. We have 20 acres of cropland that we currently rent out to a neighboring farmer, 10 acres of hayland that's also rented. And then we're managing about 10 acres of pasture currently with our sheep and rotational grazing. We have about 3 acres in annual production. It's a mix of variety of things. And then we do have about a couple acres in perennial plantings, windbreaks, willows, and we'll get a little bit more into all of that. We're a little bit of a unique farm focus. We have a focus on craft materials. And so we raise basketry willow, which you can see in the other photo here, one of our handmade baskets growing next to some of our young willow plants. We also grow broom corn for handmade brooms. We grow flowers that we sell, both fresh cut flowers, and we do a lot of dried flower wreaths and arrangements. So crafting with those. We also have sheep. The sheep are both for the craft focus. We have a Shetland breed of fiber sheep, and then we have Katahdins for meat production. And we also have a native plant nursery. So we sell those things in different forms, and then we go to markets. We sell through a flower CSA. We do a variety of craft fairs, have a farm stand, and we sell online through our store. We can ship our products anywhere in the country. We also have a focus on education here. So we do workshops, we do field trips. We've had several groups of kids come out to the farm. We do have a nonprofit branch of our farm. So Farm Craft Connect is our 501c3, and that kind of houses the educational programs. We both have a background in farm-based education, and as we were starting Bundle Sticks Farm, we knew that that was a big component of what we wanted to bring and share here. So that element of really being able to bring people out to the farm to connect with the land through the crafts and through the farming practices is really kind of core to what we are doing here. And we're the two people behind Bundle Sticks Farm. As I said, I'm Elizabeth and Brian here. And we also both work part-time off farm remotely. So currently, in terms of the economics of our farm, we are able to funnel off farm income into starting up our farm project. So I'm just going to quickly kind of touch on a little bit deeper into the materials we grow and the crafts that we make, the ones I just mentioned. So willow was kind of one of the very first products that we knew we wanted to include in our farm. It's an amazing plant. Brian's going to get into some of like the environmental and soil health benefits of perennial agriculture and coppice agriculture, which willow is. But it's a beautiful plant. I love making willow baskets. So this was kind of actually the first plant that we built the craft farm vision around. And we grow a wide variety. We have over 40 varieties of willow that we are growing right now. They're 1 to 3 years old. And so they are the oldest of those are just coming into production for really quality basketry material right now. And these are a couple examples of the baskets that I've made from willow. We also are growing some more structural willow that can be used for like living fences and non-living fences, but woven fences as well, and more like structural garden supports and things like that. So the willow was the first plant we added because it takes so long to to come into real production, we started looking at other plants that could be part of our farm and craft vision. And broom corn was the next one that we settled in on. So we grow broom corn. It's actually a type of sorghum, and it's not corn. Looks a little bit like corn when it's growing, but yeah, it makes this beautiful long stalk that we use for broom making. Brian's the broom maker, and so we've integrated this. It's an annual, also great for other uses on the farm, such as forage for our sheep. And I think Brian will touch in on that a little bit more later as well. Do you want to add anything right now? I'm kind of going through these materials.
I'll just add that with the craft focus, these crops that we're growing, they supply our own supply chain from making crafts and selling. They also supply um, materials for the workshops through the nonprofit, which the farm just kind of like donates those materials to the nonprofit. But then we're also working to be able to sell some of these products. So to sell the cleaned broom corn to other broom makers. That's still like a process that we're working through. But we're getting ready to offer the sale of broom corn uh, actually in the next couple of weeks, which we've been working up to for a few years. So that's another aspect of the craft focus, I guess, is producing the raw materials for other crafters.
Absolutely. So then flowers is another of the main crops that we're growing for crafting. As I mentioned, I do sell them as fresh cut flowers. So I do a bouquet CSA, sell to through our farm stand here at the farm, and we do you pick events where folks can come to the farm and pick flowers. Then I also dry a lot of what we grow to use in dried arrangements. So some of those are pictured here. I sell the wreaths and other sort of styles of dried arrangements, and we offer workshops. So there's just a couple friends who came and took a workshop at the farm. Those are a lot of fun and just a neat way, again, to kind of be connecting to the land. Folks get to come see the farm. We do a little farm tour when they participate in a dried flower workshop or a broom workshop. So really seeing that like from seed to finished product on the farm. And then the sheep are another more recent addition to our farm. We started our flock of sheep last fall. Currently, we have 20 Shetland sheep, our fiber flock. And then we just this summer added Katahdins. So we have 10 Katahdin ewe lambs that are at the beginning of our meat flock. And these really were prompted, the addition of the sheep was really prompted by the land, the farm that we ended up at. The amount of pasture that was here and the size of this farm was larger than we had previously been managing. And so we knew that we needed to bring grazing animals onto the farm to help us with the land management and fertility cycling on the farm. So they have been great for that. We do practice rotational grazing. So they move around the farm every 2 to 4 days. Mostly out in the pastures, but we do graze them through our cropland at specific intervals when that works with the life cycle of everything that's happening. And yeah, these have been a really great addition. We're starting to see some results from having them on the farm already, so that's exciting. And then the last thing I wanted to touch on in terms of kind of all the things that are happening and products on the farm is our native plant nursery. So we have a small nursery set up here. We are growing out a variety of native plants, and we do a spring plant sale every year, and then have native plants available kind of to order throughout the season as well if people want to get in touch with us and come to the farm to pick those up. But our spring plant sale is becoming an annual tradition that we really enjoy, connecting with other native plant folks in the area. So that's a growing piece of our farm, and it's really another kind of core component to what we're doing here is we have this focus on building biodiversity. And so being able to be growing out these native plants, having them in place on our farm, demonstrating, having those plants people can go and look at those specimens growing, but then being able to help propagate and share those and distribute them into our local region and beyond into the ecosystem here is a big part of our mission as well. So with that, I'm gonna hand it over to Brian to kind of do more of the deep dive into soil health. practices and principles that we use here. And I'll chime in now and again, I'm sure.
Okay.
So take it away, Brian.
Well, as we're in this little pivot here between like the overview of the farm and then the deep dive into soil health, how are we doing? Are we, is it sound okay? Is there any pressing questions that anyone wants to address before we dive into the soil health part of things?
It looks like, let's see, I think you pretty much answered the first question in the chat. And Ellie asks, gorgeous products. Can you share more about storage and processing setups for your grown raw materials?
Sure, I can touch on that a little bit, and if you want to chime in too. Yeah, it's interesting. The storage and processing, especially for dry materials, has been a learning journey in this climate. I'm from Oregon, which is where we met, and we moved from there to start this farm in the area in Oregon. I know a lot of people out here picture Oregon and they think it's really wet there, but we were living in Southern Oregon, very close to the Northern California border, and it's a very dry, semi-arid desert environment, and things just dry there very easily and stay dry, which is not the case here in our humid summers. So with the flowers, I'll speak to that in particular, and then maybe Brian, you can chime in with some of the things about the broom corn. They're actually pretty similar. It just looks a little different how we handle those materials, but with flowers, the process is harvesting at proper bloom time, which is a little different for each flower variety that you grow, but just harvesting at that ideal time. And then we hang them in our barn. We have a large barn here that was our farm was previously a conventional corn and soy operation. So the barn was built to house large agricultural equipment. So we're fortunate now to have this large dry space. So we hang everything, all the flowers on a very simple drying rack, hang them in bunches. We bundle them, we bundle the sticks, hang them upside down. And then we do keep a fan on there just to keep the air moving. And it takes about 2 weeks for the flowers to dry down completely. And then I store them in cardboard boxes in our house. I wish I had a totally separate storage facility for them, but that's not the case for us yet. So that's the basics of storing. And it's pretty similar with the broom corn. We also dry it down. But yeah, if you want to add anything about that.
I would just say it works to our advantage being the people who are going to be using the materials in the end, because that really kind of incentivizes paying attention to the materials all the way through the process. And we've definitely learned by making mistakes. And by not paying attention to things. So, for example, like we have had fans in the barn and then felt like everything was stable and good, turned the fans off, and then just got a spell of humid weather after a long spell of dry weather, and everything in the barn just kind of shifted slightly. Um, so just learning those little nuances of the spaces that you're working with and when the humidity and like kind of like microbial things change and what to do to keep the materials happy is has been a little bit of a learning process, but it just comes naturally with like needing the materials in the end and really depending on them being high quality. Um, and another thing is like we've learned to just like grow way more than we think that we need to make some room for those mistakes. At least that's part of the strategy with the broom corn. And with the broom corn as a crop, it's a little bit like, hey, like we're doing an initial dry down in the field because it's so green and it has a lot of moisture in it. So we're laying it out for like a day or two before we bring it into the barn to get that like field moisture out of it before we take it into an area where there is other dried materials that we want to keep in a good stable condition. So we've learned to dry the broom corn down in the field, and also we've learned I prefer to dry it down in the shade so it doesn't lose its green color. It's something that we're kind of like going for as broom makers is a fresher broom corn look than just like a sun bleached material.
And I'll speak just briefly to the fiber as well, because that's another material, and the willow. So Fiber, we're just, as I mentioned, the sheep came onto the farm last fall. So we're just in the beginnings of handling and processing fiber. But we work with a sheep shearer, friend of ours from Southern Kentucky, who makes the rounds of Kentucky and Indiana. And we shear twice a year in the fall and in the spring. And then that process is washing, carding, and spinning the wool. And that's something that I do, and I love hand spinning, but as we build our flock, we're going to be looking into working with a woolen mill also to do some of that processing for us. And then with the willow, that is something I think we're going to talk a little bit more about coppice agriculture, which is the harvesting process where you're cutting the willow down to the ground in the winter. So we cut that down to the ground in the winter when the leaves have dropped. We bring that into the barn and dry it down. And for basketry willow, you are curing it for several months until it's completely dry. And then it's stable for years. And when you're ready to weave with it, you actually rehydrate it by soaking it for a period of time, depending on the length and size of the material you're working with. Then you weave the basket and then re-dry it, and then it's solid. So yeah, our barn is a key piece of infrastructure for us for housing and drying a lot of our materials. Thanks for that question. Was there, I don't have the chat pulled up. Was there anything else in the chat that we want to answer or speak to before we move on?
Ellie also was curious. She said, "You've done so much in such a short amount of time," and absolutely, I agree. How did you both set out with your vision?
Good question. Well, we met doing on-farm education for kids. We were working for partner nonprofits in Oregon. So from the beginning, we knew that we shared this like passion for not only farming and plants, but also the educational component and sharing that with people, sharing the farm with people through that. And I come from a background of crafters. My mother's a fiber artist. My grandmother was a potter. My grandfather was a painter. So that has always been part of my life. I grew up crafting. And as I then also like became a farmer and a plant nerd, when I learned that like I could do plant-based crafts, that was a really happy place for me. So we knew that we wanted to be doing this educational focus. And Brian has experience as a market farmer. We both have experiences working on market farms, and we kind of knew that that wasn't the direction that we wanted to go. Mad respect for our market farmers, veggie farmers, food farmers. We need them very much, but that just wasn't what we wanted to be doing. And so we kind of honed in on the craft materials as a very tactile and tangible way to like engage people. That also was mostly working with a shelf-stable product and didn't have that like kind of time-sensitive demand of fresh food production and marketing. Yeah, so I think that's kind of the gist of it. Brian, you want to add anything about that?
Yeah, I think I would add a couple of things that with the focus on craft, um, I think we both wanted to focus on that because, like Elizabeth was speaking to, we were working with kids. We wanted to work with the public and involve people and like help connect people to farming and to the land. And like Elizabeth was saying, the craft is very tactile. And hands-on. So, but it also comes with like these different types of traditions. So like depending on where your family or your lineage comes from, we all kind of have these old like ties to different types of land based craft. And so we really wanted to have a farm model that like allows people to kind of explore that or experience that. And I really like as a farmer, I feel like the light turned on for me. A light turned on for me with like basketry materials living out west. I'm from Indiana, but we met out west and out west working on land restoration projects where I learned about indigenous like cultural programs that focused on language and indigenous culture in the Pacific Northwest and how their educational programs often start with basketry. Um, be, So like starting with a focus on basketry even before learning about traditional foods is like a really interesting approach because it clues people into becoming a caretaker of land for like a couple of years before you get the materials to make a basket. And then you uh,
Start
kind of
harvesting.
graduate to harvesting and taking from the land. And so I was just really inspired by that relationship too, and like shifting that focus to a more like a long-term and perennial based um, like perspective on farming was really interesting to me.
Yeah, it's a way that kind of puts you into that reciprocal relationship with the land of caring for it. Because, like I mentioned, like with the willow, you have to care for that plant for several years before you actually get material that you can then harvest and make something from. So, yeah. All right.
Love, yeah, I love that term, that reciprocal relationship. That's so beautiful. And Brian, I don't know if you're going to get more into broom corn production later in the presentation, but Rhonda wanted to know if you turn the broom corn over in the field similar to hay when you're turning.
Yes, great question. We harvest it and typically lay it out on, I don't know, can this go backwards?
Mhm.
It's not working.
I'm gonna try again. There we go. Yeah,
Yeah, so on this slide, you'll see at the top there's broom corn laid out on tray or like on gates or
pallet table.
pallet tables, whatever we've got. That sometimes we just use long pieces of wood across the frame of a trailer. And we lay it out. We don't lay it out in the sun like this anymore. We try to do it in the shade, but like I said, we lay it out for like a day. So it's similar to hay. It lays out and dries for about 12 hours or a day, and then we flip it and kind of fluff it. Um, and then we bring that into the barn. And similarly, in the barn, when it's on, that we have racks in the barn and fans. Every once in a while, I'll just go through and kind of flip it just to kind of reset it and make sure everything's dry and stable.
Yeah. And since we're on this slide, I just want to highlight, so the process after drying, broom corn has all the seeds on the brush part of the plant, which is what you make the broom out of. And this little action shot that's a little hard to see exactly what's happening, but is Brian using this antique threshing machine that we got. It's a de-seeder, and it's stripping the seeds off of the broom corn plant. And that is one thing that has been really fun about integrating broom corn and broom making, is that actually Indiana and Illinois historically were big regions of broom corn production that has largely been lost, as this crop it does require a lot of hand harvesting, and so the most of the production of it has moved south of the border, and yeah, it's been kind of been lost in this region. But as we've been pursuing it, we've found, old equipment, and this de-seeder is an example where we got this from somebody who had this and a lot of other broom making equipment. They'd had it in their barn for 25 years, and they had bought it at the beginning of that time from a 90-something-year-old broom maker who was finally retiring in Ohio, who'd been making brooms his whole life, a blind broom maker. Nonetheless, so just all these fun stories that kind of come up as like we reconnect with this like tradition that's been in this area for a long time of broom making and broom corn production. Okay, so I'm gonna take us back into the soil health, and then please keep putting questions in the chat, and we'll have time either throughout if y'all want to like shut, Megan, or want to interrupt and point out that there's a question we should answer, or we'll have time at the end and we'll get into some more questions as well.
Okay. Soil health. I think I'll just preface by saying we absolutely love our soil. We feel really privileged to be on this farm. It's by far the best soil that I've ever gotten to farm on. It's classified as great agricultural soil, and so protecting it and building it to health is a huge focus. So I just put the like four soil health principles up here. These are like the ones that are talked about through the USDA and the NRCS. we are aware of these and definitely like them. They are maximize living roots, keep the soil covered, minimizing soil disturbance, and building biodiversity. And I just added above and below ground. And we'll have some slides later that kind of get into why I added that. And then the soil health practices listed here are the things that we do specifically. And then there are slides that hopefully we'll have time to get into kind of like illustrating a lot of these. But we have strip tillage, we do shallow tillage when we cultivate. We have crop rotation that we're working out. We do a lot of cover cropping, both in the summer and over winter. With the sheep, we're doing a lot of crop livestock integration, especially with the rotational grazing and moving them into lots of different areas on the farm. We do a type of subsoiling, like breaking up the deeper soil through broad forking. Um, we have a focus on perennial plants that helps meet that maximizing living roots principle. We have a focus on resprout agriculture, which I'll illustrate on a slide here. We do organic production here, so we're using organic inputs for fertility, and we're not using synthetic inputs for fertility or for livestock health. So our primary like purchased organic inputs are composted chicken product and kelp, and we get those from Deerfield Supply in Kentucky. We take an annual trip down there to load up. Um, and then lastly, we do some like soil microbiome management. So like compost teas and other practices to like foster and build certain microbial populations at different points in the farm process. And then another concept that is like really important to me that stuck with me, I heard from a friend, John Bell, who said that long term, it's the fertility program that usually determines whether somebody is successful with organic. And it's a very straightforward, simple statement that I think there's a lot of truth to. And when I heard John Bell explain that and saw it on their farm, what I saw was um, grazing animals that came into a crop rotation during periods of rest for annual production. And then those animals being fed hay and other foods from other parts of the farm. So you're importing the fertility from some parts of the farm to your production beds through the animals. And because if you just try to switch over from conventional management to organic management, and you just try to switch conventional inputs to organic inputs, it will be very expensive to move all that material to your farm and to buy those things. And you probably go broke. So this is what strip tillage looks like for us. We have a little two-wheel tractor. That's a BCS two-wheel tractor that can take different implements. In that picture, it has the rototiller on it. And this is prepping a broom corn patch on the left there. There's flower production on the right there. We have a little piece of wood with a flag marker just to help us keep the rows straight. And what we're doing here is strip tillage, which is a way to minimize the soil disturbance. And I went to ag school back in the day, and I can remember, I don't remember what the studies were, but I remember the message of the study was that with different types of tillage and soil disturbance, there are microbial populations that just kind of don't survive that act and go extinct in that place where the tillage happens. So, but those microbial populations survive where the tillage doesn't happen. So wherever you have an edge, microbes can repopulate an area where there's tillage. So if you till an entire field, if that entire field of broomcorn had been tilled, um, the only reserves of microbes that were disturbed would be at the very edge, and that's all you'd have. But with the strip tillage, you have these reserves built into the production beds, and the recolonization of the soil by those microbes happens much more and faster. And then shallow tillage. So when we do weeding, we're just using hand tools like the wheel hoe on the left, that very blurry picture of a diamond hoe at the bottom right. And then, or we're learning to use an adjustable frame cultivator for the two-wheel tractor. That's a little cultivator setup that Earth Tools in Kentucky makes in Kentucky for the BCS walk-behind tractors, and definitely has a learning curve, but is a very interesting and powerful tool for cultivating. Okay, this is the, it looks very complex crop rotation slide. But basically we have our annual production areas in blocks. We have about 8 blocks. This is what we're striving to do. Um, Basically, we have 4 years of annual production, starting with broom corn, then moving to watermelons, and usually watermelons with cowpeas, but then our flower production, and then followed with veggies. And then we're moving those production blocks into pasture with grazing with our sheep. And sometimes going into this winter, we are going to be moving the sheep into those pastures for longer periods through the winter and doing a type of like um, overwintering and concentrating their nutrients onto those production beds, and what a type of bale grazing maybe. I'm not sure. People have different definitions of what bale grazing is, but so this is what that looks like over winter. We last winter we just kind of tacked together um, a structure to keep the sheep a little bit protected from wind. And those are straw bales, so that's not what we're feeding them. But this is just to illustrate one, that it's fun when you put things into the pasture, sheep climb on them, which is fun. But also, there are different parts in the rotational grazing season, particularly in the winter, when the sheep might be in one spot for longer. Like it might snow and we have snow and ice for 2 weeks and they don't move anywhere. So we're trying to time those so that they happen in our production areas, and so that when we're bringing them their food, all of those nutrients are coming into our annual production rotation. Do you want to talk about subsoiling since you're the broad forker?
I'm the broad forker, I guess. Sure. I mean, if you aren't familiar, a broad fork is this piece of equipment here that you can kind of see. The tines are hidden in the soil right now, but they're like a foot and a half. And that it's an old type of piece of equipment, and it's just used to kind of break up and aerate the soil without inverting anything. So it's not doing any of like the flipping action of disking or tilling. And it's just person powered. You kind of stand, you hold onto those two handles and stand on it, and then rock back to kind of open things up. And it's just a way to create those pathways. You can see here, like this bed has already been done. So you can kind of see these like perforations where those tines have gone in and opened it up. And then that's allowing water, air, and plant roots to have easier access further down into the soil. So we try to kind of incorporate this as we do our crop rotation. So I'm not trying to like broad fork all of our production land every year. That would be a serious workout, but just making sure that over the course of several years, all of our production areas are getting that touch of the broad fork and that aeration. We also, use some cover crops that do similar things, just with their roots, the tillage radishes and things that do some of that breaking up. But the broad forks are just a kind of nice way to manually apply that consistently across the bed. And it's a great workout.
Okay, so we talked about the importance of crop livestock integration, and we also talked about how perennial plants are a part of our soil health strategy. And this is one kind of interesting way, or it's interesting to me, that we are combining these practices. So we're feeding our sheep uh, tree fodder that's like fresh clippings, and also tree hay, where we're drying the tree clippings and then feeding them in the winter months. So on the far left, we have just a random mulberry tree that's growing next to the silo before we pruned it. And then the next picture over is after we pruned it. The middle picture there is a close-up of a branch where we pruned a lot of the early spring growth off of it, but left one to grow and photosynthesize. And then those are bundles of, again, like fresh green growth, because the animals prefer that fresh green growth. It's got higher concentrations of nutrients and less concentrations of like indigestible things that develop over time in the growing season. So we're primarily doing this in the early spring and putting it up to dry, but we're also able to come back to that same mulberry tree and clip fresh sprouts, 2, maybe 3 times in a year to bring those snacks to the animals. And we're finding that for us, we're able to do that with different species, and that the sheep like certain species, especially the mulberries, the willows, black locust, a hackberry they really like. And then they're not trees, but other plants that we have found that we have a lot of and the sheep really like are the partridge pea and honeysuckle. And then, as I mentioned, we're only using organic inputs for fertility and we're not using synthetic inputs. And I think that that's working for us on the pastures to help things like this happen. So these are pictures of a couple of different kinds of dung beetles that just showed up on the farm a few months after we brought the sheep in. Um, what I hear, I don't know this for a fact, but what I hear is that the dung beetle populations can be affected by synthetic treatments to sheep that they might get for like, I don't know, antibiotics or dewormers. I'm not exactly sure like which ones people say can disrupt the life cycles of dung beetles, but either way, we brought the sheep in and the dung beetles followed, and they are extremely active in the pastures, and it's amazing to watch how fast the manure that the sheep leave behind is being dragged down into holes by these little creatures and recycling the nutrients.
Yeah, they will in a matter of days, like clear the pasture. We'll move the sheep off and there'll be, manure on the soil surface. And in a matter of days, the dung beetles will have taken it down and integrated it into the below soil.
And I'm aware that the picture on the right, that is some diarrhea looking, but that's not great poo. That was during a very wet spell.
Big rain after a dry time. So the little sheep's digestion was a little funky,
their
but
poop firmed up in a day or two. Okay, this is a very busy slide, but another focus of ours is on perennial plants, and this is an interesting tree planting that I wanted to share where we're establishing hedgerows. So this we're hoping will become a living fence. So it's situated between our production areas on the left and pasture areas on the right. And we're hoping that after 3 to 7 years of growth, we'll be able to practice hedge laying, which that picture at the bottom is not our farm. That's a hedge at a very well-established hedge in like a European style somewhere in Europe. But that is what we're hoping to do. Um, and we're trying this out with the same species that people use in Europe, but we're using the native species to here. So the Washington hawthorn is hawthorns are often used in European hedges, and we've planted those here. To be determined if they're going to work here. They get a lot of the cedar apple rust for us here, so we may be planting more Osage orange into these in the future. But this is just an interesting type of tree planting that we're doing. I hope that it works. The hedgerows have an immense number of benefits as illustrated in this little hedgerow illustration from the internet that we found. I won't get into all those right now, but if anyone's interested, I encourage you to learn more about them. Great for wildlife. The sheep come graze them.
I won't get into them, but
Yeah, I can't help it. We also put some native legumes in the hedgerow and we're hoping that when the sheep are able to graze up into this hedgerow, they can access those native legumes and maybe even spread their seed out into the pasture a little bit.
and just so just really quickly, for folks that maybe aren't as familiar with a living hedge, this is a long tradition practiced in Europe. There's not much of it happening in the United States yet. Some folks are starting to play with it, including us. We've found some inspiration and resources from the Savannah Institute as well. But the idea is like this dense planting that you can see that we've done, and this even isn't as densely planted. There's a few spaces we're still infilling, so dense planting. And then, as Brian said, where you let that grow 3 to 7 years, and then you do this hedge laying technique, which is not cutting the tree down, but cutting it partially, laying it over, weaving it together in such a way that when that resprout agriculture occurs, it's sending up more shoots vertically, and filling in and continuing to become more dense and impenetrable to livestock. So it'll become a livestock proof living hedge. And then you redo that hedge laying technique every like 7-ish years. And so there are hedges that have been maintained for hundreds of years in this style in Europe. So we're very excited about experimenting with this as a living fence.
Yeah, and with that bottom photo, that clean edge that you're seeing would be the outside edge, and that growth edge that we can't really see on the other side of that hedge would be the side that the animals are in and able to come up to and graze. Browse.
All right, soil microbiome management and perennial plants.
Yes. So there's the hedgerow down there on the right, and when we put these in, we treated the mulch to bring in some soil microbes. So what we did was we walked out into the woods, into places where there were healthy trees, so healthy maples and other trees that we put in our tree planting. And we reached down and grabbed some of the soil next to those trees, thinking that those healthy trees have healthy associations with microbes in the woods. So we took just a tiny bit of those soils, um, put them together, and then put them in a bucket of water and fed them molasses to kind of like propagate them and make a compost tea. And then over the course of a few days, we stir it a lot. That helps just oxygenate it and activate it. And then it starts to kind of bubble and smell sweet if you like the smell of good soil. And then we took that and put it in a trough with some of the mulch that we were going to use on the trees and soaked that for a couple of days. And so when we were filling up our wheelbarrows to take them out to the trees, in each wheelbarrow, we just took a scoop or two from the trough and kind of inoculated the mulch with those microbes to kind of spread those into the tree plantings. I'm just gonna do a little quick time check. Okay, I'll try to go through these last few real quick. We did a tree planting with the NRCS. The first NRCS supported tree planting that we did was in the eyes of the NRCS. It's a wildlife planting, but for us, it was designed in such a way that it will be a windbreak. Oh, that's all I'll say about that for now. Another point about the soil microbiome and kind of breeding those microbes from the forest. We also put some of that into the potting soil whenever we grow trees or transplants. So each time that we're transplanting annuals or perennials out into our fields, we're trying to inoculate the fields with certain microbes.
And just on the previous slide with the photos of doing that initial tree planting, we did a similar practice. Those were trees, bare root trees that we brought in from the DNR, but we did put a little bit of an inoculant, basically the compost tea, in with those. And the idea being, again, that like those trees will perform better in that soil that has those microbes and like the fungal species that would be in the woods, but we're bringing them in and planting them into cropland. So just giving them a little boost to help them get established in more of that native soil, tree soil.
Yeah, I believe there's, what I've heard is that there's tree studies that look at the effects of mulch on tree plantings, and that mulch trees grow like 150% of the rate that one 1.5 times uh, the growth of unmulched trees. And intuitively we think, oh yeah, that's because it's retaining moisture or keeping the weeds down. But there's also a theory that, well, that could be partially because those wood chips and mulch are bringing in microbes to the area. This is another NRCS thing, supported thing on the farm. We did a wildlife planting at several areas around the farm. It's kind of interesting how we did it. It seemed a little crazy to have like wildlife plantings kind of, it's not just like one patch, it's kind of snakes around the farm, but that's been really fun and interesting, I think, because the wildlife patches are kind of everywhere on the farm.
They basically border our croplands on most sides. So it's a really nice way to have, some of all the things we've just been talking about. It's like perennials. The soil's never disturbed there, so it's this repository for wildlife, large and small critters above and below ground that can hang out there. That then, is we're getting the benefits from those in the cropland within those pollinator plantings.
And one quick snippet that am I find really interesting is I put this like soil microbiome management question mark here with the native plants. Um, and that's because there's this interesting project at Cornell that researchers are calling the Organic Microbiome Project, I think. And basically, they're partnered with like 80 different organic farms that are sending soil samples in, and they're evaluating the soil microbes populations changing over time from different parts of their farm with different practices. And one of the farmers that is sending in samples there had this theory that I really liked, that in these plantings of native plants, there are all these insects and birds that arrive on your farm that didn't come there before. And we are definitely seeing that, like the diversity and the number of species of insects and plants are just exploding with these plantings. And so his theory is that as above, so below, like with that biodiversity that's coming in, all of those creatures are pooping, they're dying, they're reproducing, and they are decomposing into the soil and bringing an addition to the soil microbiome that wouldn't be there without those native plants, and could be necessary for your soil to have at least some of that around in order to be healthy. Um, okay, I'll try to do this quickly. Re-sprout agriculture is a big part of what we do, and you can see that in the basketry willows. So with the basketry willows, we are harvesting them every winter. We cut them back to the ground. That's the picture on the left. We cut them back in the winter, not only because that's best for the plant, because the plant is dormant and all the energy is in the roots, but also because it's best for good quality basketry material to take the rods when there's not a lot of sugars in them. That's just a nice coincidence. And but those what gets left behind, the living roots and that part above that gets cut down, um, that's what people call a stool. Those stools survive. They get stronger and bigger every year. They come back in the spring. That's the middle picture. And then that picture on the right is like, that's third year rods coming out of a stool.
And these willow can get 6 to 15 feet tall in that 1 year, first year growth, because they have that well-established root system supporting them. So we're harvesting rods that are as tall or taller than us now that our plants are getting established.
So yeah, in the willow production, that living roots part is really what you're doing during those establishing years, is just building up that living root mass in those stools so that they can eventually, by their third or fourth year, produce basketry quality rods. The height and thickness for basketry. And then we're also feeding the willow sometimes to the sheep, and we're also finding that we can graze the sheep through the willow during the wintertime. Oh, and that last slide, if folks are interested in that resprout agriculture and coppice
This is a fantastic
technique,
resource.
that's a great book that just came out kind of recently called Coppice Agroforestry.
Yeah, and there's, do you want to talk a little bit about the carbon sequestration element of the willow and the coppice? Or should we not go into that right now?
I don't know, we might be at time, but you could.
Oh, I don't know. I'll just, I guess, just say that like because we're um the plant is capturing and sequestering carbon because it's growing, it's putting out these massive shoots and these rods, and we're harvesting those and storing them in the form of beautiful willow baskets. And that is happening year after year after year after year. So there's some, I don't know all the numbers and studies that are being done around it, but willows are very powerful, and other coppice agriculture plants are a really powerful tool in that way. So I'll just say that. And then we do have our contact information up here, Bundle Sticks Farm. We're on the socials, and our website is there. And we'd love to stay in touch with folks. So feel free to reach out. Hello at Bundle Sticks Farm. And I think we have a couple minutes if there's questions still. Yeah. I'll go ahead and stop the share so I can pull up the chat and see what's going on. But Megan, if you've been following the chat and want to pull anything out for us to touch on, please do.
Um, yeah, it looks like you pretty much covered everything that people asked. There was some question about whether or not you had a flail mower attachment for your cover crop termination strategy, and if you use a push mower for your walkways.
Yes and yes. We do. We have the flail mower for the BCS, and we use that for our cover crops. We also use that, yeah, just for terminating our crops, flowers, veggies, and broom corn, and getting them broken down to integrate back into the soil. And we do have a push mower for our pathways, and we are working on getting it dialed in, but ideally our pathways will be exactly the mower width. So that's kind of part of our dialing in of our systems.
Got it. And then additionally, you touched a little bit on this, but I don't know if you did the full answer to the question. I believe it was Rhonda. She was interested in what kind of infrastructure you all have on your farm, and like what you guys discovered when you were there, or whether you've put infrastructure up since moving.
Yeah. One other just on the equipment and mowing that we use, I will add that we were coming from smaller acreage farming, and so the BCS was something we brought with us when we came here. But we have purchased this spring a four-wheel tractor, so we now have a small Kubota with a mower, so that we are able to clip our pastures. So that was another piece of equipment that's been pretty essential for us to really start managing our pastures and following up the sheep on there. And then the infrastructure, basically what we mentioned, there's this large barn that was here, and we have a small, like three-walled cinder block shed that was also here. We have not put in really any additional infrastructure yet. We will be building a shelter for our sheep. We have portable shade shelters for our sheep that we move around. They're actually old tobacco wagons that we got from a neighboring farmer who doesn't use them anymore, and just put shade cloth on top of those, and we're able to pull those either by hand or with a vehicle, so we can move those shade shelters around. But we do need to have a space for our sheep, primarily for shearing. The Shetlands need to be dry at the time of shearing, and so if the weather's not cooperating with us, we need to have a place that we can put them. Otherwise, we're on pasture pretty much all the time, and we're lambing on pasture in the spring, and so we're not winterizing them in a barn. But that's kind of our main infrastructure that we're looking at adding right now, and then additionally developing some more infrastructure for the craft work. So right now we're really making do with what we have, utilizing the barn space, but we have some dreams of some more like craft space, and particular workshop spaces to bring the public and be able to host, and not be weather dependent on having a good day for an outdoor workshop.
And I'll say something about the infrastructure for the sheep. When we moved to the farm, it was only partially fenced, so really just one side of the farm has a fence. So we currently do not have a hard perimeter fence around the farm and the sheep. We're working towards that, but so in the meantime, we have a two-strand electric fence um, that goes around the front 15 acres that we are managing. Two-strand electric fence. It's something that we got from Premier Fencing, and it's baited. So it has these little caps that have cotton balls in it that we load with apple scent. And so if deer come up, they get attracted to the caps and they try to get at the apple scent, they get zapped, and that so far, knock on wood, has disrupted their patterns, and they do not come into our production area. But also, that two-strand fence takes electricity all the way around the 15 acres, so we can just plug into that wherever the sheep are.
And we use the mobile sheep netting electro net fencing, also from Premier, for our rotational grazing.
And we've been able to put in a couple of water hydrants in some strategic places with our soil and water conservation district helped us put in those livestock waters, which has been nice so that we don't have to carry water as far. We're still carrying water, but not as far.
Wonderful. Kevin wanted to know, you mentioned planting cowpeas with watermelons, mostly for soil health, weed suppression, grazing, question mark. How's the timing working out?
Yes, for soil health, for weed suppression, and for grazing, all of it. We're also interested in watermelons and cowpeas because when they are taken with broomcorn, like broomcorn, watermelons, and cowpeas are all native to the same area of the planet, like the in Africa, and they're really kind of like that area's version of the Three Sisters, the corn, beans, and squash. And so we're really interested in trying to find out, evolving a production system and a cropping rotation that has those three built into it. I think there's a lot of potential with all three of those crops. Indiana's great for watermelons. Cowpeas are extremely productive, like even non-irrigated, and um, they can be grazed. And we were just talking about this a couple of days ago that I think that maybe for harvesting cowpeas that the production system might work best in this climate because cowpeas get so big and bushy and they'll just like cover a car if you park next to them. And so like my theory is I wonder if we graze it a couple of times and then we could still harvest the beans at the end of the season to keep our seeds going. So we're still working it out, that timing. That's a big question. Every year we're doing experiments and trying to figure it out. And there are some experiments that people did with broomcorn production that show that broomcorn does best like with strips of cowpeas in between it. So we've done a little bit of that experimentation, but we're still kind of working it out.
It's tough because we still have to be able to get access into the broomcorn to do weed management and such. And like Brian said, the cowpeas just kind of take over. But yeah, they are a great kind of guild of plants that work together, the cowpeas, watermelon, and broomcorn. So we're working on that. And then I saw this question about irrigation, and we do use drip irrigation in the flower beds and a bit in our veggies, which are just for our own use, not one of our products that we sell. So we have drip irrigation. I use the drip tape, 2 rows per bed. All our blocks are 100 foot long, so everything can move from block to block as we rotate. And we do not irrigate any of our perennials or the broomcorn. So that's all dry farmed and just timing planting with rain, and hoping for the best and relying on that soil health to hold moisture and provide the nutrients that's needed. And I mean, really, we're really only drip irrigating to supplement. So we actually only use that irrigation at really the driest times of the year because we're able to do most of it just with the rain, which is really fortunate.
Well, thanks so much for sharing. We are at 10 o'clock. So for anyone who wants to hang on to get the updates from the rest of the team at Urban Soil Health, we'd love to keep you on. But for those of you who need to go to other meetings today, I just want to extend an additional thanks to Brian and Elizabeth. Bundle Sticks also, you should check them out online. They have lots of really great educational opportunities. One's coming up this weekend for Broom Corn Workshop, I think. So if you want to learn how to make a broom, I've seen some of the finished products that people who go to their workshop show online, and it is really stellar for first time broom makers. I have to say, you guys must be great teachers.
Brian does a great job. It's going to be a fun workshop this weekend. It's making a cobwebber style broom, which is a great technique. You get to learn like a little bit of a lot of different parts of broom making. So check that one out.
Great time to, get those cobwebs.
Yeah. And thank you so much for having us. This was great. Really appreciate the opportunity to share about our farm and the work we're doing, and hope to stay in touch.
Great. Thanks so much, Brian. Thanks so much, Elizabeth.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you. And we'll get the recording up on our YouTube channel for Urban Updates soon, so that all of our other audience can listen to what you have to share. And I don't have a huge amount left. Just wanted to, let's see. Yeah, pop in with some regional updates, some program updates. Biggest thing as of this morning, we are under a government shutdown. So how that looks like for us as an affiliate partner is that we are all still working as a team. We have ability to go at least 3 months with our team. So hopefully we'll get back up and our government will get back up and running before then. We're still waiting on communication to hear about programs effects from our NRCS partners, but we'll stay in close touch with them and keep on keeping on. This is a photo of my little froggy friend I found in my chard in the backyard for the first time, seeing a frog the other day, and that was lovely. If you have any questions, big thing with that, communicate with us via our association email addresses. We have auto replies on our government emails, so we're still reachable. Just find us on association emails. And then I have just been so thrilled to be able to get out on farm, not to all of these, but a few of them. And just a huge thank you to Kevin, Allison with Marion County, Kara Bergschneider with NRCS, our small scale conservationist, our whole USH team, and particularly our growers for being the amazing hosts to get out on farm at 8 trainings for ICP staff, mostly NRCS, but also other ICP. Just a really invigorating time to remember why this all matters, and hopefully inspire other conservation professionals to really think about the whole system and suite of conservation practices on farm and utilize NRCS financial assistance programs where it makes sense to support our growers on practices they're already doing to address resource concerns, and then implementing new practices too. And then I almost forgot to put this in because it's been a whirlwind of a month, but early this September, we had our Get the Dirt conference. And, as things are changing with our program, we debated about even doing this right up, big event right up at the end of our time together. But I'm so thrilled that we did. And a huge thank you to our whole team for getting together, organizing speakers, presenters, having both the in-classroom components to hear from our presenters, and then getting out on farm at Full Hand Farm afterwards. Like, just such a joyous celebration. And again, like, inspiring for all of us that no matter what iteration USH takes, we're all still really committed individuals here in our state, and there's so much to continue to learn from all of our from everyone, and loved that confluence of just bringing us all back together. And speakers' presentations are, I believe, on our website at this point. So just a huge shout out again to Ush. In this iteration, we are wrapping up this week. We did have an extension from yesterday through the end of this week, the 3rd, for our whole team. Terry is out in Alaska on vacation though already. We have Tanvi and Casey still on the line, as well as Megan. And just again, so thankful for all that this small but mighty team has done over the past few years. And sorry, kind of an abrupt transition there, but for those still on the line, I do still have one major update. So although we are winding down Ush in its current form, we were able to, at the final hour, secure an NRCS contribution agreement for the next 21 months. This came right down to the wire of this fiscal year. I'm so incredibly grateful to our NRCS partners for extending this opportunity that just came out of the blue, for us to be able to continue some of our work. Now, it is going to be a difference and a shift in our roles and responsibilities. It will be just 2 small farm conservationists, one north and one south, as well as a program director doing administrative work, and also some field work with counties in the center. And this will look like much more close work with NRCS, working with software tools, working with Conservation Desktop, and doing card assessments, and particularly getting out on farm, doing site visits and providing technical assistance to producers, but then being able to be that really close handoff of producers to NRCS when there's an interest in EQIP, CSP, financial assistance for practices. So that will be starting up here with hopefully a pretty seamless transition. We are going through a rehiring process right now with our current USH staff. So those that have interest are in a competitive process, unfortunately, to be able to apply and interview for those 2 positions. So long way to say we're keeping up this work. We're going to still be able to do some events and outreach, but a shift more in our workload and deliverables. So stay tuned for more communication on that coming out soon. Feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions as well for what that means for you. And man, we still have a busy event schedule going forward, a lot of participation from our USH team, a lot of Living Farm Series events coming up, one a month going through December. There will be one also now in January in Southwest. So stay tuned on Living Farm Series online on our events page, as well as our newsletter. We have events starting, tomorrow, compost facility tour and demos. This understanding organic producers' needs. I'm not positive if that's still happening from the shutdown. Agroforestry, silvopasture field day. Really recommend that you guys can make it down to Nightfall Farm in Crothersville. They were Get the Dirt speakers and doing some amazing work in the Southeast. We'll see you again in November for urban updates. If you can make it up to South Bend, their working group, Scrap, is doing their soil health summit. And back down to Megan's farm, Unvarnished Farm, in December for hopefully a nice day to build a high tunnel. So for all of those on the line, we'll see you again in November. We don't have a speaker yet. Stay tuned on our newsletter. Make sure you're signed up because that's where we announce our next speakers, topics. And thank you all for staying on the line, for hearing us close out. I will turn it to our USH team if there's anything else that you would like to share and pop in, or any partners as well, for what's happening in your neck of the woods.
Hey, good morning, folks. I figure I'll pop in real quick. Ellie showed a lot of events that are going on affiliated with USH, and one that is going to be right after another Marble Seed event. So New Farmer U happening in Bloomington that you saw on that slide. We are doing another partnering event with Marble Seed on November 6th, specifically geared toward organic growers. So that's going to be called Organic University. It'll be taking place at the Hendricks County Fairgrounds in Danville, Indiana. We've got a capacity for about 40 participants, and it is open to both specialty crop growers and grain growers. We'll have a slate of speakers, including Dan Perkins from Perkins Good Earth Farm, Chris Adair from the Purdue Student Farm, and Laura Ingwell from Purdue Entomology on the specialty crop side. And we'll also have Sam Oswald Tilton from Glacial Drift Enterprises, and you may have heard of him from the Midwest Mechanical Weed Control Field Day, as well as Leon Atwell and a panel of grain producers for the grain side to talk a little bit about weed control as well as marketing. So if you're interested in that event, please feel free to reach out to me directly. The Indiana Organic Network that I'm a part of is helping to sponsor that event and host that. I will drop a registration link in the chat for you. And if you get the DFFS newsletter from Purdue, information about that event will be in that newsletter as well. So I'll go ahead and drop that link in the chat here in just a few minutes.
Awesome. Thank you, Ashley. I'll get that into our newsletter to come out today as well. All right. Anything else from anybody else? All right, team. Well, thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you on the flip side. Take care.